Good afternoon, everybody. The Committee on Education and Career Readiness is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairwoman Tice.
Here.
Senator Horn. Here, sir. Senator Runstead.
Here.
Senator Daly.
Here.
Senator Palanki. Senator Geis.
Present.
Madam Chair, there are 5 members present. There is a quorum.
Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 5th and October 19th, so moved by Senator Horn. Hearing no objection, the minutes are adopted. And I will make a motion to excuse our absent members, and without objection, the motion carries. Thank everybody in the audience for their patience. Session went a little bit long today, and I apologize for that. We are going to start by considering Senate Resolution 86, which is a resolution I introduced early last week. There is an S1 substitute. The S1 substitute just adds some language to urge the State Board of Education to refrain from participating in any actions that will further limit the right of constitutional free speech for our parents. I will accept a motion to accept the substitute, so moved by Senator Horn. Will the clerk please call the roll?
On adopting the S1 to SR 86, Chairwoman Tice.
Yes.
Senator Horn.
Yes.
Senator Runstead.
Yes.
Senator Daly.
Yes.
Senator Palanki. Senator Geis.
No.
Madam Chair, there are 4 yeas and 1 nay. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you very much. So speaking to SR 86, our committee is going to hear some testimony on this resolution. It's a resolution that condemns the U.S. Department of Justice's decision to investigate parents for exercising their constitutional right to free speech by voicing their concerns at public school board meetings. On Monday, October 4th, the Department of Justice issued a memo instructing the FBI and the U.S. federal attorneys to convene with state and local officials to address what the memo labels as threats and establish a special hotline for the FBI. The false implication the Department of Justice memo conveys is that a significant portion of the parents participating in these protests are threatening the members of the school board and public school officials, and that this problem is so extensive that it warrants a Department of Justice memo. Using isolated cases of legitimate threats to paint an entire class of outraged parents is a cheap political ploy. The Department of Justice memo was a politically motivated response to a letter from the National School Board Association sent on September 29th. The association's letter requested federal intervention on local school board issues. It likened civic participation to domestic terrorism and hate crimes, and the letter even cited the Patriot Act. But of the 24 incidents cited in the letter, most of the incidents didn't even involve any threats of violence, much less actual violence. The association's letter cited tense verbal exchanges, protests, yelling, picketing outside the meeting, parents carrying signs, chanting slogans, shouting over school board members, or exceeding their allotted time speaking. In some of these incidents, the police intervened to eject parents who refused to wear masks or were being otherwise unruly. I think I'm stating the obvious in saying that these aren't acts of violence or even threats of violence. While it may be uncomfortable for some to listen to this, this is speech. Equating legitimately expressed outrage of parents' concern for their children's well-being to acts of violence and real threats against school officials through an official memo of the Department of Justice, no less, undermines civic participation in our governing process and discourages parents from using their First Amendment right to free speech. That's not to say there haven't been incidents of violence or threats to commit violence. No one here supports or condones those. These things are illegal and should remain illegal. But these incidents fall almost entirely under the jurisdiction of state and local authorities, not the federal government. The Department of Justice, which, per the memo and their press release, is convening meetings with local officials and taking calls through an FBI hotline, has provided little to no justification for their actions. In testimony before the House Committee on Oversight last Thursday, Attorney General Merrick Garland, who issued the memo, said that he wasn't familiar with the examples or the details of the various incidents cited in the very letter upon which the memo was based. He said that they were relying entirely on the National School Board's letter for the need for such action. As of this morning, 21 state school boards associations have distanced themselves from that letter. The response from parents has been so overwhelming that the National School Boards Association issued an apology over its original letter to its members last Friday. But the Department of Justice has yet to retract their memo, and to the best of our knowledge are convening these meetings to go after parents as we speak. The issue at stake here is whether the parents expressing themselves at a public school board meeting is something that we celebrate as part of our constitutional right to free speech and as part of our governing process, or is lumped in with real threats and acts of violence. Sometimes free speech is messy. Some of the things cited in the association's letter were rude and uncivil. No one likes getting yelled at. As a public official, I've faced my fair share of angry constituents, and I've also experienced actionable threats. The Department of Justice's memo muddies the water, failing to respond to specific threats or incidents within their jurisdiction, but rather casting a broad shadow over thousands of parents who have showed up to school board meetings to change their child's school through their constitutionally established process. The Department of Justice, through its memorandum, has not yet been retracted. It's mobilized the FBI to intimidate parents without legal basis, and we now know, premise this on misinformation they didn't bother to verify. It was a dangerous abuse of authority that has badly compromised the Department of Justice's integrity. Parents should not have to brave the threat of federal action against them simply to voice their concerns over their children's education. Without the patriotic spirit and courage of American parents who are evidently undeterred, and in some cases even more committed to voicing their concerns, the Department of Justice targeting parents could otherwise have had a chilling effect on the exercise of free speech at these public meetings. The entire purpose of school boards and public school board meetings is to hold the public school systems accountable to parents. Public school boards answer to parents, not the other way around. A bedrock principle in America is our First Amendment right to express ourselves and to petition our government. And at no time is this more important to defend than when the residents express disagreement with government policies. It appears the Department of Justice memo was a scare tactic to silence parents. I condemn it and anyone who supports this blatant attempt to intimidate parents who are just looking out for their kids. So my first comments or questions come from Senator Geis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you really believe that this is condemning every single parent, that the Department of Justice's concern about the rising violence and escalation that we've seen at public bodies, whether it's a school board meeting, whether it's the, which we've seen across the country, even here in Michigan, whether it is the, our own chamber. I'll remind you of April 30th of 2020, when we had armed people who were not sergeants or members of law enforcement in the gallery of our chamber, all the way up to January 6th and the disruption of the proceedings of the Electoral College.
So the Department of Justice is expressly calling on the FBI to pay attention to school board meetings where the School Board Association has characterized parents as domestic terrorists. There's a very real difference between an actionable threat. Those are already illegal. Threats are already illegal. Are parents passionate about what's going on? Yes, absolutely they are. And is the time when it's going to become uncomfortable when there's a disagreement between the school board and the parents? Yes, absolutely that is true. But I didn't make that characterization. The Department of Justice did. I'm the one that's trying to separate that out. I specifically said actual threats of violence needed to be acted upon. But when we're characterizing parents' free speech as intimidation, we have a real problem.
So I've got a copy of the letter, the Department of Justice's letter here. And I don't think there's any reasonable reading of this that suggests that they're characterizing all parents as domestic terrorists. I think they're specifically concerned about the rise that we have been seeing in escalated and problematic rhetoric that we've been seeing across the country at specifically school board meetings.
I think there, as I said, is a very, very large difference between free speech and actual threats. Senator Runstead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remember reading years ago a line from an individual in a state that was a state of complete, utter control of the citizenry. And the line was that you don't need to terrorize, torture every citizen to bring them in line. You just need to get one. Let the populace see you torture one person and nobody's going to get out of line. You don't have to get them all. The purpose of this was not to get every single parent who shows up at school board or is thinking about going to a school board. Make them fear that they're going to come under investigation if they even show up, if they speak. And pretty soon you silence the individuals who want to complain about their government. This is what goes on in totalitarian societies. You use the federal government, the biggest force we have, to go after individuals under terrorism, instead of the local law enforcement like has always been done in our country. This is to terrorize parents into silence. They don't have to go after them all, just go after a few. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to read something to you, to the committee, and to our audience. The First Amendment: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. The word abridging is very interesting, and I think that when you describe the chilling effect that is put on there when the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, a former nominee for the Supreme Court, based on a letter from a teachers association or a school board association, can just order this. If you are eyeballing, if the FBI is asked to keep its eye on every school board in the entire nation, then it is being asked to keep its eye on every parent who addresses that school board. This is chilling free speech, and I think that we need to move forward on this. It is also shows on the part of Washington, D.C., the complete lack of trust that they have in our local law enforcement. And now that was demonstrated through the riots, the actual harm that was done by fires and in the hurting of people, the harming of individuals, the violence that was done. But to carry it into a school board meeting, I think is probably one of the most un-American things I have witnessed in my 30 years in politics.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Geis?
Thank you. Just in terms of this idea of things that are carrying chilling effects, or that where changes are instigated based on assumptions that might be made about people. Is anyone on this body familiar with the Mumford Act? I realize it's from another state, but are you familiar with the Mumford Act of 1967?
Assuming you're going to inform us.
That is the California bill that prohibited open carry as a response to the Black Panthers open carrying. And this is very similar, what this resolution, which is non-binding, is having a very similar type of response to the situation that the Office of the Attorney General's letter is responding to. So I just wanted to bring that up as not a precedent, but as an example of just a potentially harmful policy or suggestion for a harmful policy that is being instigated by this resolution. Also, just as to address our colleague who mentioned the riots, that data has shown that I realize that there's a narrative that is being implied, and that the riots that I'm imagining you're referring to that occurred during 2020, that the bodies, the individuals that some people assume were the instigators of those riots were shown not to be the violent actors, but that it was actually groups that were affiliated with white supremacists and other actual domestic terrorist groups.
Senator Horn for a follow-up.
Thank you, and let me bring you a little bit more current events. and bring the committee's attention to the House and Senate hearings where the Attorney General could not explain properly his position on ordering the FBI to investigate school board meetings, and could not and would not talk about other issues including our border crisis and other issues. No, this was very specifically designed without reasoning, and the Attorney General could not explain that.
Thank you, Senator. To speak today, we have David Coleman with the Great Lakes Justice Center. Welcome. It's nice to have you here. On the bottom base, there should be a button. Yes, you're on.
Thank you, Senator Tice, esteemed members. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to this Senate resolution. My name is David Coleman. I'm an attorney, senior legal counsel with Great Lakes Justice Center, 501c3 nonprofit legal organization. And we're here today to discuss Senate Resolution 86 as it relates to parents and school board members and some of the constitutional and other issues and problems that arise from what has been done at the federal level. The first point I'd like to make is that one I think that is pretty obvious and it's been kind of mentioned already, and that is there is no federal jurisdiction here. There just isn't. These are state and local law enforcement issues. Obviously, threats, real threats, we call them true threats in the legal realm. Actual violence are not protected speech, we all understand that. But that doesn't give authority to federal officials to do anything. The Department of Justice, the FBI have no authority here. Attorney General Garland's memo of October 4th, if you look at the memo itself, and as he testified just recently, where he tried to clarify and say, I'm only talking about actual violence, actual real threats, that sort of thing. Well, if you read the memo, that's not all he says. And I take what they say in writing. As an attorney, it means something. Words mean things. And he says very clearly, we're here to stop violence, threats of violence, and, quote, other forms of intimidation and harassment. Well, what does that mean? Other forms of intimidation and harassment? It's not just threats and violence. And then they're inviting people to call this hotline from all around the country and turn in their fellow citizens for simply exercising their free speech. He does this, cites no data, cites no proof of any spike in threats. There have been incidents, isolated things you could always point to around the country where there's been, problems. But many of the items in the NSBA letter have been shown to be not accurate. They're questionable at best. And that's what the Attorney General relied on. And now they've rescinded their letter, but the Attorney General has not rescinded his motion. He has tried to clarify, well, what do these words mean? Other forms of intimidation and harassment. What does that mean? That's the key question here. The memo cites no federal statutes, no laws, no authority, no regulations to support what they're doing. So what is the basis? Well, the NSBA letter does reference a number of different federal acts, and I invite you to look at them. I won't go through all the sites, but Section 18 U.S. Code 875, threat to injure, 18 U.S. Code 249, Section 245, the Hate Crimes Act, things like that, the Patriot Act. All those deal with federal issues, and you know what's interesting? They all deal with violations when it's involving interstate commerce. If you look at those statutes, take a look at that. It requires that the federal government cannot get involved unless it's involving interstate commerce. How are parents going to a local school board meeting having anything to do with interstate commerce? That's ridiculous. So I invite you to look at those things because they're not cited in the Attorney General memo that he puts out. You have to read the NSBA letter, the AG's memo, in context because they have a much different definition of violence. There are legal definitions in the case law and in statutes of what actual violence is. That's not what they mean. When they talk about violence, they mean things like words are violence. Have you heard that before? Words are violence. Words are not, acts are violence. So if somebody says something that somebody disagrees with, that's a violent act. That's the problem here. How far does this go? And this leads to my second point. You know, what is the real purpose of this? It's First Amendment violations. It is chilling free speech. It's a clear attempt to try to intimidate parents and others from exercising their constitutional rights. The AG and the NSBA give lip service to that. They talk about, hey, you know, protected speech is fine. You know, you can all have your speech. But then the NSBA repeatedly refers to parents who are doing just that as domestic terrorists. So again, you get back to definitions of these words as to why they're doing it. Constitutional violations are replete here. Beyond just free speech, there's a right to peaceably assemble. And what does that mean? I've heard people say, well, peaceably. What does that mean? You have to sit there all docile and just talk real calm and not do anything? You know, that has nothing to do with it. We don't riot. We don't attack people. Peaceably assemble. It doesn't mean people can't get angry. It doesn't mean people can't be forceful in letting their points be known to school boards or any other government entity. No one is burning down schools, not that I've seen. What about petition to redress grievances? Another First Amendment right. See, it's not just free speech, folks. There's a number of things in the First Amendment that this applies to. These acts are clearly met, in our opinion, from the Department of Justice and the AG memo. They're trying to silence parents. They're trying to intimidate them into obedience. And so I've read Senate Resolution 86. I would urge its adoption. And I'll just end with this. I'm happy to answer any questions. Don't forget Michigan compiled law 380.10, which is part of the public school code. And as parents are coming to these meetings and talking to their school board members, remember 380.10. And let me just quote it for you. It's short. It was passed about 25 years ago. I think it was then Representative Mike Nye, might have been somebody else. Some of you might remember Mike. Quote, "It is the natural fundamental right of parents to determine and direct the care, teaching, and education of their children. The public schools of this state serve the needs of pupils by cooperating with the pupils' parents to develop the pupils' intellectual capabilities, vocational skills in a safe and positive environment." Everybody wants a safe and positive environment. That doesn't mean you can't get angry and have your voice be heard. It doesn't mean you can be shut down so you can't talk. That's not a safe and peaceful environment, in my opinion, or a positive environment. But it is the natural fundamental right of parents to direct. Do you get that language? You know, those who say parents don't have a right to know what's in the curriculum or to be involved. Our state law says the opposite. So I encourage you to take a look at that. When parents believe school officials are not doing this, they're not following our law, and they're trying to silence them, they have the right to speak up without being intimidated by school officials, unions, or the federal government. Thanks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Senator Geis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Coleman, is it not true that your organization, Great Lakes Justice Center, is one that does not in fact support public schools, public school teachers, or administrators, and instead supports a number of things that actually do violate the principles of our state constitutional requirement to provide all students with a proper public education?
I think that's a totally unfair characterization of our organization.
Should I read what's on your site?
If I can answer the question. I'm a product of public schools. My mother was a public school teacher. I had sisters-in-laws that are public schools. All my brothers and sisters went to public schools. We support public schools, but we support all education. And to voice an opinion that the public schools are getting off track does not mean you don't support public schools. And so I support parental choice in education. So if a parent wants to homeschool, if they want to do private school, If they want to do public school, that's their choice. That's what I support, and that's what Great Lakes supports.
Okay, fantastic. If I may follow up, Madam Chair. So you have educators in your family. I imagine then you've watched them create their syllabi, the rubrics for their courses, and you probably are also aware that it is very public-facing what the curriculum is for every single grade level in the state of Michigan. So parents do have that information, but outside of a parent being a professional in education, they probably should not be deciding what is in the curriculum. And while I understand, as a parent myself and as a former educator, the ability to redress to use your First Amendment rights to address or redress your government, whether it's here or at a school board meeting, that what has been occurring and the rising temperature of exercising that First Amendment right, whether it is a threat of violence, or other forms of intimidation and harassment, as the letter does say, and one can still be harmed by other forms of intimidation and harassment, that it is imperative that it is that those things are addressed. Just because we have the First Amendment right, and yes, everyone has the ability to blurt out or say whatever they want to say, I still cannot, and none of us in here can yell fire in this room if there isn't actually one.
Sure, I'll just respond briefly to that. I think it's a core tenet of our organization, as well as all organizations that are in this field, is that you treat everyone with respect, that everyone is due proper courtesy and all those things. And the problem here is that just because somebody gets angry because they believe they're being lied to or that things are being withheld from them, for example, you said parents have access to the curriculum and things like that. Well, I could tell you from experience in cases I've handled all over this state, that's not true. There are parents who try to get copies of curriculum, they try to find out what's going on, and they're rebuffed. They do Freedom of Information Act requests, and they get handed a bill. Yeah, you pay us $1,675, I think was the last one, and we'll give you copies of some of this stuff. I mean, outrageous things are being done, and this is why parents get mad and angry about it. And so, but I agree with you totally that everyone should have respect and listen to opinions and not do it with rancor. Do I agree with everything that parents are saying or the way they say it in these board meetings? Of course not. But the issue is, does it rise to the level of saying, well, we got to go after that person, or we have to prosecute them or something? That's where it's going too far. So I frankly agree with a lot of what you were saying, you know, in terms of how everyone treats each other and how those things are done. I just think maybe we're looking at it from different points of view, but I also think just because somebody's offended by words or they feel like maybe they're harmed by words does not give them the right to use the law or the federal government to go after them. That's where the line should not be crossed, and those are the battles we fight at Great Lakes all the time.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Senator Horn?
Thank you for your testimony, and since we have your expertise here, if we look back, it's roughly a year and a half, somewhere in that area, and you look into the Senate's recorded journal, you'll find the term probably more than once, silence is violence. If I take that term literally, could that fall under the Attorney General's memo as being intimidation?
Well, that's the kind of thing I think is unknown at this point. And that's the problem when you start trying to define violence beyond what everybody accepts as violence. You know, physical action, injuring people, things like that, burning down buildings. Those are all acts of violence. To say I disagree with you or I don't like the way you're implementing some program is not an act of violence. And that's where it goes too far.
But sitting in the audience being silent when you know something's wrong.
Well, I agree. You should stand up and be heard.
So the question.
But I wouldn't say it's violence.
The question comes down to, even if you don't say anything in the audience, who's doing the intimidating? The federal government or the person sitting in the audience?
Yeah. No. Good points. Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Appreciate your testimony.
All right, thank you for having me here today.
Next, we have Tanya Hug, a parent from Livonia Public School. Welcome.
Heard. This is a better platform than the school board meeting I was trying to attend. I am here joined by my husband, 2 of my 4 children, and my father, who reside in the Livonia Public School District. We have attended several school board and city council meetings where I myself and my 14-year-old son have given public comment. On October 18th, he and I again attended a school board meeting, but were denied our rights to public comment. I am here to discuss what occurred the day after the school board meeting at the Senate Committee on Education and Career Readiness. I was shocked to hear my Livonia representative, Senator Paul Hankey, who is not here today, discussing a situation involving me. The way she described the school board meeting and the people who attended it was such a stark contrast to what had actually occurred, provable by several videos. Upon the arrival at the school board meeting, I was denied entry, as were several others, by the person manning the door. He was denying individuals without a face covering entry into a public meeting, effectively denying many people our First Amendment rights, along with many other rights, which the health department has no authority to supersede. In any case, although unnecessary, I willingly and politely, as recorded, provided documentation and notice of my disability precluding me from wearing a face mask or face covering of any kind. The gentleman at the door, along with others inside, granted me access into the building, while still denying the constitutional rights of the other people outside, including my son. After entering the meeting and silently sitting down in the front row, Colleen Burton, the school board president, made a public mask announcement, and then without any parent ever saying a word, the school board members stopped the meeting and took a recess to discuss my naked face. Colleen Burton then came out and told me to put on a face shield, which I informed her I wasn't able to do and showed her my notice again. She told me that I would have to leave if I did not put on a face mask or face shield, and I politely requested written documentation that she was denying me my right to speak at the open meeting due to my disability and because I was not wearing a face covering. Otherwise, please call the police department so that they can write a case report noting the school board's denial of my right to speak. She denied my request, as witnessed by over a dozen people at the meeting. That's why the police were called. It was my request. The police came, and I politely spoke with them, as the recording would show. And then again, several parents outside spoke with police politely, as another recording shows. However, Tuesday, October 19th, the Livonia representative, Senator Paul Hankey, stated, and I quote, "Just last night, my chief of staff, sitting here behind me, Dan Centers, he is a school board member, and he texted me from the back room of a school board meeting where the school board members were overrun by hostile, screaming people opposing the mask mandates, and the police were called, and it got ugly." She went on to say that opine isn't the same as threaten, scream at, disrupt, and intimidate, none of which occurred the night before. She blatantly lied to deceptively push the false narrative, and it is a false narrative, that parents are attacking and mistreating the elected officials and our school boards so that she can justify her Senate Bill 86, which inhibits the parents' right to free speech. At no time was there hostile, screaming people overrunning the school board, causing an ugly scene. There were no threats to the school board. None of us got to speak whatsoever. The school board had given threats to me, saying that that they will wrongfully have me arrested for trespassing if I come back to another school board meeting where I have lawful authority to be present. This is an egregious act by the school board upon myself and many others. That is what actually needs to be addressed by all elected officials holding office in Michigan and throughout our entire country. Senator Paul Hankey, we the people are not happy with the way Michigan is handling the schools, and we will continue to peacefully air those grievances as our right to do so allows, until our questions are answered and until our elected officials start doing their job as public servants and listening to the will of the people. Please underline the word elected. for you are elected officials and you are ignoring the will of the constituents, so there will be consequences. No one cares more about our children than the parents of these kids, and putting the parents in control of the decisions that are made on behalf of our children is all that we have been advocating for during public comment at all of the school board meetings. This evidence is readily available in countless YouTube videos of each and every school board meeting where you have access to seeing how parents are speaking. You have access to videos of me speaking at several school board meetings, never raising my voice, although I have a right to do so if I so choose. But I have been cordial thus far. I have never been disruptive, and I have never threatened or intimidated anybody. Being thrown out of my school board meeting was against my rights and atrocious. What you will witness in the school board's meetings are the school boards ignoring the will of the parents and the grievances of the people that are elected, that they are elected to serve. Put a bill into place to ensure the protection of the First Amendment rights of your constituents or the people who have elected you in office. You see, what I'm doing right now is not a threat. I am informing you that you are elected to represent we the people. Thus far, you have not had an opponent in the game you are playing, but you have awoken the giant called we the people, and you do not like that we the people are speaking out at our school board meetings. You do not like us letting other people know that they also have rights against the atrocities local elected officials are trying to push without authority. When you use vague statements such as threaten, disrupt, and intimidate to try to deny people our rights to free speech, you will feel the backlash. It will not always be pretty and it will not always be polite, but either way, that is the right of the people to do so. It is not intimidation or a threat to let our school boards know that they are elected and can be removed. Do your job properly according to the constitutional oath of office, which each elected official is sworn to uphold the Constitution. We, the people, have the authority over elected individuals. We are the employers, and we will not sit down and relinquish that authority to power-hungry, authoritative dictators ignoring our constitutional rights. I thank Senator Theis and all who signed for Senate Resolution 86, a resolution to condemn the U.S. Department of Justice memorandum on intimidation and harassment against school board members for inhibiting parents' constitutional right to free speech. Seeing as how it is so easy for someone with presumed authority, such as Senator Polhanke, to make deceitful claims without proof, it does show how harmful and discriminative the original Senate Bill 86, submitted by Dana Polhanke, is without this resolution. We, the people, and the parents are not intimidated by unlawful and unconstitutional threats, and we will continue to do our duty to protect those rights by speaking at each and every open meeting guaranteed by our constitutions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Hug. And I just want to make a point that you reached out to me after our last committee hearing, after seeing the testimony and being concerned about its mischaracterization of your experience with at the school board meeting. Would that be a fair statement?
That is correct.
All right. Thank you very much. Senator Geis?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mrs. Herr. It's unfortunate what you experienced. However, Wayne County Health Department, so Livonia is part of Wayne County. Wayne County Health Department does have, back on, I believe it was August 26th, I think it was, or 27th, somewhere around there. I might have the wrong date, so I don't want to be yelled at for misspeaking. It is when it authorized, it made its determination that all schools, school buildings, from pre-K, including daycares, all the way up to 12th grade, that they would have to have masks for parents, volunteers, students, teachers, visitors to those spaces. And I would imagine that it extends also to school board meetings. If you get pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt, do you argue with the police officer?
Are they denying my ADA rights to be at a building?
Is there something that has been, so there isn't an ADA right around masks that I'm aware of. And let me finish what I'm saying.
I have ADA protected rights.
You might have ADA.
to not
Ma'am?
wearing a mask that I have a notice
Ma'am,
about.
So this
may I
is not,
finish my question?
this is not
You asked
a
me a
debate
question in the meeting
about
of your statement.
This is not a debate about the legality of masking requirements. This is a discussion on a mischaracterization of a situation that happened and part of the reason for the resolution that we have here. So if you have a question for her with respect to the resolution,
Okay.
then by all means ask it.
All right, so in your testimony just now, you said there will be consequences. I've been cordial thus far. You've awoken the giant. You will feel the backlash.
Okay.
Those are, in any context, by any reasonable human being, threatening statements.
Those are statements stating that I will vote out the members that are not giving me my constitutional rights. If you take them out of context, as you just have done, and put them all in a big lump, then yes, out of context, they could be used as threats. However, they are not.
But your intent behind them is to make a threat. And yes, I was not suggesting that you said them all in one swoop as a unit of text or a unit of speech. However, within what you were saying, and you're very coy about how you utilize the language, which is remarkable. However, those are among the things where language can be utilized to convey a threat.
No, what I was stating is that you guys are elected officials, and when parents come and state that we will have our elected officials removed because they are elected to do constitutional authority towards what we have, that you will be removed by the means of the people voting you out. If you want to take those words out of context and say that they are threatening, that's what you tend to do.
Thank you. Senator Horn.
I just want to add that, you know, I've been in, as I mentioned earlier, in this arena for some 30 years. I've had people threaten me with primaries. I've never taken that as a physical threat. And the one thing I could probably say about your testimony is at no point did I ever think that you were being coy. So I think you're very direct. I think you're being very honest, and I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Horn.
Senator Daley.
I just wanted to basically, he kind of beat me to my words. Thank you for taking the time to come here today. Thank you for letting us be heard, because I've been in this arena for a long time as well and never felt threatened. You've said nothing here today to threaten anybody in my mind. That's our job. We're working for you people. You have a right to threaten us if we aren't our votes. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. So I will entertain a motion to report out SR 86 as substituted with recommendation that the bill pass. So moved by Senator Daley. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Joe Mathice?
Yes.
Senator Horn? Yes. Senator Runstead? Yes. Senator Daley? Yes. Senator Palanki? Senator Geis?
No.
Madam Chair, you have 4 yeas and 1 nay. The resolution is reported.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to have testimony on HB 4343 brought to us by Representative Coleman.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. I appreciate you taking the time to consider my legislation, House Bill 4343. This legislation works to solve an issue that unfortunately we've been unable to solve for several years. Under the federal law, the Department of Defense is required to provide all veterans with a military honors funeral upon request. All of our veterans deserve recognition and honor one last time before we lay them to rest. Unfortunately, there are fewer people capable and willing to perform taps at a military honors funeral. Despite knowing the estimates of the number of military honors funerals each year, the Department of Defense has been unable to secure enough buglers to provide this portion of the funeral throughout the nation. In fact, some funerals have had to make do with a simple recording played from a CD or tape deck. One solution that some folks have come up with is what they call a ceremonial bugle. And this is when you take a bugle and you outfit it with a speaker, and then a member of the honor guard would hold it and pretend to play. Nothing, however, can replace the solemn, beautiful sound of a live bugler playing live music. at the funeral for the mourners. And thankfully, under current regulations, civilians can play taps, though we still have very few adults who are trained, able, and willing to perform. What we do have, however, is high school students in our districts who are capable of doing so and who would like the opportunity to honor our veterans. In fact, the Youth Trumpet and Taps Corps has identified this need and both trains and organizes volunteer high school musicians to play at military honors funerals. Founded by Katie Pryor in 2014 as a Girl Scout Gold Award project, the Youth Trumpet and Taps Corps has grown to over 100 members located in 30 states. The success of this organization proves that there is a need to be met, and students who are willing to give their time to honor our veterans but need our support to do so. This bill, House Bill 4343, simply provides that any student who is willing and able to perform this solemn act will receive an excused absence for any classes they miss as a result of attending a funeral to sound taps. We shouldn't let an unexcused absence stand in the way of our students who want to honor our veterans. No student should be punished for performing at a funeral, and they should have the confidence that upon returning to class, they won't have to fight to be excused for the time that they missed. While this may seem a small matter to some, for the families of those who have served and are laying to rest their loved one, the military honors funeral, including a live sounding of taps, is an important final opportunity to honor their service to our country and their life. Thank you again, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you, Representative. I see we have a question. Senator Geis.
Yeah, thanks, Representative. So students sometimes, especially if they're going to competition for, annual band competition or orchestral competition with that are otherwise sanctioned, like state-sanctioned, ed-sanctioned, music department-sanctioned programs where they might, if it occurs on a school day, why couldn't this just be tucked into the Youth Trumpet and Taps Corps be tucked into when students might have to miss school because they're doing band competition or whatnot?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the question. So this legislation was introduced by my predecessor, Representative Kozowski. It was brought to his attention by a local VFW post who students at one of the local high schools had reached out and let them know that this was an issue. And then after doing some research, there were some cases around the country that showed that some students had issues when returning to school. And it being a unique situation, when a whole class or a whole group of students goes out, there tends to be less of an issue because the instructor or the teacher would handle the absence for them. When it's just one or two students unfortunately going to a funeral, but in order to pay respects to veterans, there have been cases where the absences weren't awarded.
So they were marked?
They were marked absent, unexcused, yeah.
Okay, so normally when we have one of our children is going to be absent, we call the attendance line, and it's either, if you call the attendance line, it's marked as you're still absent, you still have to make up the work, but it's not an unexcused absence as opposed to like truancy, or if you're gone for enough time for it to be considered truancy. How would this be different than just the parent or guardian that morning? I would imagine it's scheduled, right? That they know that they're going to be playing at a funeral on X, whatever the date is. Calling the absence line to make sure that absence was excused, or if they're only going to be gone for part of the day because their funeral's in the morning or the afternoon or whatnot.
I understand your question. I think that this is probably something that happened, that has happened, unfortunately, in special circumstances where school staff or teachers unfortunately did not agree that would be an excused absence. So I do understand your question. But specifically, I would have to kind of go back and research these unfortunate situations. So, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to report out HB 43 to the floor with recommendation that the bill pass. So moved by Senator Horn. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairwoman Tice?
Yes.
Senator Horn? Yes. Senator Runstead? Yes. Senator Daley? Yes. Senator Palanky? Senator Geis? Madam Chair, there are 4 yeas and 0 nays. The bill is reported.
I move to recommend immediate effect without objection, so ordered. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to be discussing SB 460. We brought this up for testimony in a previous meeting. The S1 just changes the dates from 2021 to 2022 because it was a little delayed in getting it moved. So I will entertain a motion to adopt the S1 version of SB 460, so moved by Senator Daley. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairwoman Tice?
Yes.
Senator Horn?
Yes.
Senator Runstead? Yes. Senator Daley? Yes. Senator Palanky? Senator Geis? Madam Chair, there are 4 yeas and 1 nay. The substitute is adopted.
All right, I'd like to make a comment about this. So one of the points that was raised against SB 460 during our last committee hearing was that critical race theory isn't being taught in our schools. A Detroit News article published over the weekend highlighted 2 specific cases of this being taught in our K-12 public school system. Teachers at Grand Haven High School presented materials teaching intersectionality, one of the critical race theory's foundational ideas. With intersectionality, educators are instructed to consider themselves in multiple intersecting ways based on their race and gender and other ideologies. This presentation, titled Pledge to Equity, also cited Boston University professor Ibram X. Kendi, who has consistently demonstrated how his DEI trainings are based on critical race theory. Quote, "The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." Grand Ledge Public Schools is paying a critical race theorist, Michigan State University professor Dorinda Carter Andrews, $200 an hour to advise them on how to incorporate this racially discriminatory philosophy in their schools. Andrews' biography on MSU's website states that she examines issues of racial justice in P-12 learning contexts and on college campuses, urban teacher preparation and identity development, and critical race praxis with the K-12 educators. She has previously stated that capitalism and school systems are inherently racist and built on white supremacy. Despite assertions to the contrary, it is evident that CRT is already within our school systems. Children learning to treat each other with dignity and respect, regardless of race, color, or religion, is where we should be going, but CRT is training the next generation to divide people into categories and use oppression matrices instead. And this should never happen in Michigan. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill. I will entertain a motion to report HB 43 to the floor with a recommendation that the bill pass. So moved by Senator Runstead. Will the clerk please call the roll?
On reporting Senate Bill 460 with a substitute.
I'm sorry, SB 460. Thank you very much.
Chairwoman Tice?
Yes.
Senator Horn? Yes. Senator Runstead? Yes. Senator Daley? Yes. Senator Palanky? Senator Geis? No. Madam Chair, there are 4 yeas and 1 nay. The bill is reported.
I'd like to move for a recommendation for immediate effect without objection. So ordered. Seeing no further business before the Senate Committee on Education and Career Readiness, we are now adjourned. Thank you for correcting me.